Hey, it's Chuck. Today, Ross Bjork makes a lot of people happy, Chris Henry Jr., and some big news in the 2026 class in the eyes of the rivalry through a 30-year-old Buckeye fan. Let's get it. And I don't think he's going to throw the ball as much as he thinks he's going to throw the ball now that Chip Kelly's on board. And I'm happy about that. More quarterback.
The truth is, Ryan Day has made a change philosophically, but it's none of those.
You all know who wins. LSU is the drunkest fan base in the country. Hey, it's Chuck. Welcome in. Chris Henry Jr., 2026 wide receiver, recently moved out to California from Cincinnati. He was at Cincinnati Winthrop and finished his sophomore year. He moved out to Cincinnati to go to Mater Dei, and he's going to complete his high school career out there. And he's been committed to the Bucs for some time, and he's been the number one wide receiver for some time in the class of 2026. But today, the On3 rankings just came out for the class of 2026, and he is the number 2 ranked wide receiver. This kid is an incredibly interesting prospect, who's a productive prospect, not just a ridiculous body. He's 6'5", so we're talking an incredibly tall wide receiver with a dad who was an NFL star. Last year, as a sophomore, he was first team All-State, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns, 71 receptions, and 16 yards a catch. So he's clearly got the skill, and he's definitely got the physical measurables to be the number 2 ranking player in the country by On3. 247 Composite has him as the number 3 ranked player in the country. And it's pretty doggone exciting because this kid could grow another inch or two. He's only 15. So, we talked about forever how physically gifted and just different Jeremiah Smith was. And I'm not comparing Chris to Jeremiah Smith, but he could be just as unique physically in a different way as Jeremiah Smith. I mean, I don't recall seeing a college receiver. I remember Mike Evans was about 6'6". He was the last really good wide receiver that I can remember being that tall. But obviously he was much more physically beefy. But Chris Henry Jr. has a frame that looks like he could put on a little beef. His dad was skinny, but he was muscular skinny. And this just could be really unique. I mean, we talk about Jeremiah Smith in the way he's physically freaky, and his physical gifts and just his size in general made him, pretty much nationwide famous. And as the number 1 recruit in the country as a wide receiver, the first wide receiver who had gotten that number 1 tag since Dorial Green Beckham. I don't know, had to be like at least a decade ago. So it's very rare for a wide receiver to get that. And I don't know, there's a chance Chris Henry Jr., if he goes out to Mater Dei against that tough competition and ends up getting kind of similar production, he just could end up being the number 1 wide receiver or the number 1 overall player in the country in the class of 2026. And the best part is he's a hard commit to Ohio State. His sister goes to Ohio State. My first initial reaction when he went out to Mater Dei was a little bit of worry because you got Dan Lanning up there and you've got Lincoln Riley right there, and USC has been a bit of a pipeline, or Mater Dei has been a bit of a pipeline to USC over the years. So there was a little concern. And of course, we heard DeCorian Moore, the number 1 wide receiver down in Texas. He had cut his list down to 4 teams. And what he said one thing about each team. And the thing he said about Oregon was they're not going to quit, or something to that effect. And it's just the philosophy and the way Oregon's recruiting now under Dan Lanning. They're legit. He brought the Georgia SEC aggressive style recruiting up to Oregon with the money that Oregon now has. And we're already running into them on the recruiting trail already. And they're going to be a force in recruiting, and they're going to be a common enemy for us in recruiting as long as he's there. That's pretty clear already. So slight consternation that Chris Henry is out at Mater Dei, but nothing really I think we should be worried about. But I'm still a little worried about it just because you never know until they sign. But this kid's really exciting. And I'm really excited that he got the number 2 overall ranking. That's pretty unique. So Jake Diebler got hired today. That's the big news. And I'm not a basketball guy, so I'm not going to talk a ton about basketball. But I do think it is really cool that the guy loves Ohio State. When someone loves a job and they end up getting that job after a job well done, since Holtman was let go, it's just really exciting. And we talked about Deshaun Foster getting the job at UCLA after Chip Kelly left, how much that meant to him, and how much he loved UCLA. And it just seems kind of like a similar situation. And I just always root for that kind of guy who definitely would have been a vast underdog. And if he was not in the program, he would not have gotten the job. Definitely out on the market. And it's just a really cool situation to me. We love our own here in Ohio, and it seems to me that Ross Bjork made a very popular decision. I heard a poll that Dave Biddle was talking about on Bucknuts, where he said 80% out of the 5,000 people who answered his poll were happy with the hire. And there are some people who aren't, and I can definitely understand where they're coming from. They want the best for Ohio State basketball, and certainly this is a very small sample size. And if you wouldn't have hired him on the open market, then you shouldn't have hired him now. And there's a whole lot of knocks that you can say about it. There's a list of them. But listen, it's done. Let's just accept it and root for the guy is my thought. But then again, they're diehard basketball folks that are probably the ones that are mad about this. So I don't want to tell them how to think. But I'm happy about it. I'm excited about it. I think most of us are. I think it's fun. I think it's neat. I love it. So congratulations to Jake Diebler. But I think the most interesting part was seeing how Ross Bjork handled this, because even though he's still in a senior advisor analyst role, it was pretty clear listening to him talk that he was the guy who was making this decision. And he had some interesting things to say in his press conference. One of the most interesting things wasn't what he said, it was what he did. So this guy is a smooth operator. I mean, just an incredibly smooth operator. And he's got the media wrapped around his little finger already. He's got the fans now wrapped around his finger by hiring Diebler. I heard a media guy today say, Ross Bjork is just so cool. And he is, man. He's got him. But I noticed something he did today. So when he did his inaugural press conference, he was making a point about football. And he did this thing, and it just stuck out to me because I was like, that looks rehearsed. So he was talking about football, and he stopped and he looked at the camera real seriously, and he just did this with his hand, just like this. And it just popped out to me as it looked like when they teach the presidents to do this thing instead of point. You'll see them when they're making a point, they do this. So when Ross Bjork did this and he looked real serious at the camera when he was talking about football, I just said to myself, that looks like something he's rehearsed. Well, guys, I was right. So this is him at the press conference, his inaugural press conference when he makes his football point, okay? And today he was talking about football. He was talking about all sports, and he said, if we're going to be competitive in sports, then, or if we're going to have a sport, then I want to be competitive at it. But when it comes to football, football's king, right? So he did the same kind of deal today, and he made the same move. Stopped, looks serious in the camera, and does the same thing with his fist. So this is a well-trained guy. He knows what he's doing, and he has been rehearsing for probably the last 15 years for this job. And a lot of people talk about how he fell forward. And, you know, there are valid arguments for that, but I'm happy with the guy because his philosophies align with most of ours, which is football first, and we can, wield a little more power in the national landscape of college football based on who we are. So I like his philosophy, but the dude is smooth, and you can see why he got the job. And it's interesting. He's an interesting cat. We'll put it that way. One of the other players in the class of 2026 that I wanted to mention was Rock Hill. So Rock Hill's a cornerback out of Hoban, and he is a top 10 overall player in the country as a cornerback out of Ohio. And despite the numbers over the last 20 years in Ohio, as far as college players were putting in D1 coming out of Ohio high schools, it's dropped. The depth has, but the high-end talent is still there. And, you talk about Bryce West and Aaron Scott and, two other corners who have gone to Ohio State, but they were, wanted by everybody. Rock Hill is going to be another one, obviously, a top 10 player overall in the country. And Akron Hoban has just been ridiculous lately. Last year, the class of 2024, They put 9 guys from that football team in Division I. That's crazy. That's crazy. And I'm not even counting the guys that went to, the Mount Unions and John Carroll's and Marist colleges. There was plenty of those too. And next year they got Eli Lee coming, or like Eli Lee in 25, Rock Hill in 26. Those are 2 primetime players. Last year they had William Satterwhite. He went to Tennessee. I mean, they're just loaded, absolutely loaded. And it's really impressive to have that in one school. So just wanted to point that out. We got 2 top 10 guys. Rock Hill not yet committed to the Buckeyes, but he is a Buckeye lean, and I don't see any way he gets out of the state. They're going to hold on to him. So 2 top 10 players in the class of 2026. Amazing already. Spring break is over, and practice is going to resume again on Tuesday. Now, there are 3 practices scheduled this week. We got the 19th, 21st, and 23rd. And then next week, the 26th, 28th, and 30th. And unfortunately, we are not going to see any footage from any of those because the media is not going to be allowed back in the building until the 30th to record anything. And we won't get to see anything that's going on. We won't really get to hear anything because they won't even be in there to report on what's happening. And that's not great. In fact, it's kind of garbage. So I heard 2 conflicting reports today from a couple media guys. So one said that this was new, that they weren't going to be allowed back until the 30th, and he thought that it had to do with the quarterback competition. Another one said that this is how it was planned all along, but he hadn't noticed it until now. What's the truth? I don't know. But what I do know is they used to have more access in the spring and then a smaller fall window. And now they just have less access in the spring and a smaller fall window. And I saw a couple people make comments about this, like, good, they don't need it. And I think that some people just kind of misunderstand the role here. The media is getting access to report to us. That's for us. That's not for them. It's not doing them a favor. It's so we can see what's going on. So when they pulled this media access from the guys, whether it was planned or whether it just happened now because of the Alford situation or the quarterback situation, I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like it. That's for us to see what's going on. Like I've said all along, we support the team. We want to know what's happening with the team, and letting us see some clips of warm-ups that has absolutely nothing to do with any game planning or anything else certainly isn't releasing any information that is going to hurt the team. So I don't like it. I think it's nonsense. I think it's very cagey of the coaching staff to operate like this. And it's the one thing that probably the biggest complaint I have about Ryan Day is how cagey he is with information and with things like this. It just bothers me. So he will give a press conference tomorrow. Ryan Day is talking. And we know what the subject's going to be. Is he going to answer any questions about it? I seriously doubt it. I suppose it's going to depend on, I don't know. The McCord thing, he didn't speak much about at all. And I don't mind that. I respect that. We're talking about a player, a student, a young guy. I get it. You don't want to speak about that. This is a little different. We're talking about a 50-year-old man. We're talking about an adult on your staff who just left in the middle of spring practice. So that to me is a little bit different, along with the fact that, there are a lot of people who are of the mind that he tried to push him out by giving him a 1-year contract for less money. And I don't know. We'll see if he answers any questions. I don't think he stands to benefit from answering any questions, so I don't think he will. And that's kind of his MO. If he has nothing to benefit from, he won't answer it. So we'll see what we get tomorrow out of that. But very disappointed that the media is not going to be allowed in for 6 spring practices when they were only allowed in the beginning of practice, and they're essentially filming calisthenics and a couple of useless drills. And it's just, to me, it's a thing all around college football. I talked about it the other day, and it's just a matter of control, man. It's just control the media, control what gets out. And it's disappointing. It really is disappointing. Let them in. Let us see what's going on. There's people that live and die with Ohio State football that want to see what's going on. We want to see the players. We want to see what they're looking like. It absolutely hurts them in no way to let the media in. And they're already going to be there for the press conference after practice. So, yeah, not a fan. Don't like it. My biggest complaint about Ryan Day is his caginess. He is very cagey. But, a lot of the best coaches are. Lincoln Riley is very, very much like that. Notorious. There's guys that have been really notorious for it over the years. Urban Meyer wasn't, which is one of the things I loved about him. He just said what was on his mind, so you always knew what was going on. And it's my biggest complaint about Ryan Day is how cagey he is. And then this stuff here, this is just nonsense. This is absolute nonsense to me. So you may disagree, but that media access is not for the media guys. That media access is for us. So when they pull the media access, they are pulling the access from us, and that bothers me. We got to talk about the rivalry, the toxicity that it took last year, and what's the perspective of the rivalry from a 30-year-old Buckeye fan? It's going to be interesting to explore this for just a minute because I went through this, and it's definitely weird to think about how they grew up with this rivalry compared to someone in my age in their mid-40s and above, and even guys a little younger than me. So we're going to go over it in just a minute, but first, a word from our sponsor. It's March, and unfortunately for some of us, that means it's time to reload the sports book so we can get some action on the basketball games. But before you do, I want you to make sure you don't give away any free money because MyBookie has some for the Juck on Bucks audience. Sign up for an account with MyBookie, and we're going to get a 50% deposit bonus of up to $1,000 in free bets with the promo code JUCK. And if you're new to sports gambling, this is a really good one to start at. It has everything we want, it's simple to use, and you can pull your money back out immediately. They have an extensive selection of bets, straight bets, parlay bets, odds boost, even free bets pop up every now and again, and a ton of props. I bet a little bit of basketball during the tournament for fun. I go a little heavier during college football, and it's a good time to familiarize yourself with MyBookie because when football season starts, once a week, we're going to do a live interactive college football gambling show, and I'm going to share with you for free all the information that I pay for just for watching the show. So I'll definitely be using MyBookie then for all of our updated lines. Check out my guys, MyBookie, and take advantage of that free cash with the promo code JUCK. When is your first Buckeye football memory? Mine's maybe 7, 8, 9 years old. And I was told that my guys were the guys with the golden helmets, but I kept seeing the other guys with the silver helmets and the red jersey that always looked really sharp. And I noticed the screen would say Ohio when they were on. And I recall specifically a conversation with my dad when I was young saying, but this is our team. And he said, well, kind of, but that's not our team. Our team is the one with the golden helmets. But I didn't want that team. I wanted the ones that said Ohio. And so I did. And so the years went by, and that only got stronger, even though the guys with the gold helmets were having a whole lot of success. And I brought my brother in with me, my little brother. So, we were the Ohio guys, and our family kind of looked like the Toledo Central Catholic Fighting Irish uniform. Ohio State and Notre Dame split. And if you've never seen the Toledo Central Catholic uniform, you're welcome because those are hilarious. But those are my first memories of being a Buckeye fan, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. If you were born in 1994, you're 30 years old this year. Happy birthday. Congratulations. And if you were like me and your first memory of college football wasn't until you were 7, 8, 9 years old, then your first memory of Ohio State football was under Jim Tressel, which means for an Ohio State fan, you have never really known this rivalry with Michigan. You've certainly known about it, but it's been so lopsided in your favor for all your life that you've never felt it in the way that every generation before you had. This is when it really hurts. This is when it really becomes irritating, being on the losing end of it. And a 30-year-old Buckeye fan is just now feeling this for the first time in their lives. Ohio State has lost some games sporadically over their lives in that 30-year-old's memory. But they've never known what it feels like not to have the upper hand in the rivalry, to lose 2 in a row or, God forbid, 3 in a row. And to hear these people talk, you'd never even know it. I got sons that are 23, 19, and 17. The 19-year-old is the only one that really loves college football. They're all Buckeye fans, but the 19-year-old, he's the only one that's really into it. But I mean, none of them watch Juck on Bucks. We'll put it that way. They're not into it like we are into it. But the 19-year-old has said to me before in years past, like, Dad, I don't understand. What's the big deal? He understands it now. He always used to think that Michigan was so inconsequential. And it's true. They were for a really long time. And he's told me recently, I wondered why you hated him so much. I just didn't get it. And how could he? He grew up in an era that was so incredibly lopsided. Why would he ever be concerned? Penn State was always a much tougher match. He didn't get it. Why is there such a big deal? That's the perspective of a 30-year-old Ohio State fan. 30 years old. That's crazy. So that 30-year-old was 29 when we lost 2 in a row. And he turned 30 when we lost 3 in a row. And at 3 in a row, you can now officially say, yes, at that point, yeah, the rivalry had flopped. So this year is the first time in his life understanding just why we hate them so much. He's just now feeling that bravado and the arrogance and the delusion of grandeur and the echo chamber that they live in to hype themselves up with the fake news and the stories they make up and the debunked facts that they repeat. And there's just no doubt about it that this last year with this cheating scandal, the rivalry took a toxic turn that it just never has been in my whole life, because I've enjoyed the rivalry my whole life. Sometimes it got on my nerves, and it usually depended on what mood I was in as to how much I wanted to engage with them. But for the most part, I've enjoyed it. And I wouldn't call it a friendly rivalry, but I never would have called it something that I just didn't want to be a part of. But there were definitely times last year where I checked out and I didn't want to hear about any of it. It just got gross. It got a really gross feeling to it. My best friend Mike disappeared 2 years ago. I have no idea where he is, and I fear the worst. And I've pretty much settled on the fact that I'll never see him again. And outside of my brother, he's the only guy who has ever been so deep into this life that we live with Ohio State football and the relationship that we have with it. And throughout that era of Ohio State dominance of this rivalry, he was always so scared that this time would happen again, that they would pop back up again and resurge back into prominence. And I'll tell you, man, there were some periods throughout the dominance that I was convinced that program would never come back to this level, that they would be a Wisconsin level program forever. I thought it was over for them in terms of competing for national championships. I thought very rarely would they ever compete for a Big Ten championship. I thought it was done. I really did. And it wasn't that long ago that they were selling Coca-Colas that had free game tickets attached to it, free game promos on their Cokes. It was done as far as I was concerned. And we would never have to worry or live through this again. And all Mike's worries were for naught. And then there were some of us, right, that throughout that period wished that they got a little better. They missed the rivalry. They wanted them to be better so that we could have that better strength of schedule and that bigger win to boost us on a national scale at the end of the year. And that crowd wasn't too small. And I must admit, there were definitely years, a few times, where early in the year, I would look at the schedule. We'd be 6 games in. We'd have beaten a team that we thought was going to be good early on, and they'd already lost 2 games. Our strength of schedule wasn't looking good. And I would hope, man, we need them to win some games so that win looks good at the end of the year, to help us with the BCS computer rankings or to help us with the playoffs. And thank goodness that stuff is over. We no longer have to root for anybody else to be good again so that we can beat a good team. That is done. That's one of the things about this playoff that I can appreciate, because that was obnoxious. But yeah, I was guilty of that sometimes. I was on that side of the fence at certain years I never wanted to be good because I wanted the rivalry to be good. And I did not miss this feeling, certainly. So I wasn't rooting for that, but there were definitely times where I wanted them to be better so that we could get a better win. I did not miss this. I did not forget what it was like when they were like this. Mike didn't let me. And this was his worst fear. And now we're here. And that 30-year-old is now understanding just what Mike was so scared about. We got Ohioans rolling around in Michigan gear again, beating their chest about the program that they have zero connection to. Stuff my guys my age, we grew up in the Cooper era, and there was a large contingent of kids like that. Now, the fact that that 30-year-old has never felt this way is remarkable. It's absolutely an unprecedented level of dominance that this rivalry has never seen, the greatest rivalry in sports. And that's not close. It's the greatest rivalry in American sports. And some people try to throw the Iron Bowl up there with it, and that's just silly to me. I think admitting that this is the greatest rivalry in sports is just about the only thing that both sides can agree on. And I think we both like being part of the rivalry. And it certainly helps both programs. I like being part of it. And for essentially all of our lives, the greater college football community has kind of put us as a pair, the Northern Power pair, the Big Two and the Little Eight. And they were under the impression that these programs and these fan bases were kind of similar folks. Two of the original blue blood programs. And that term gets thrown around a lot, blue blood. Listen, there's 8 blue bloods of college football. A lot of the younger folks don't understand what that means. The blue bloods are Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, USC, Notre Dame, Alabama, Ohio State, and Michigan. That's it. Those are the blue bloods. But these folks lumped Ohio State and Michigan together as two similar programs with similar fan bases. And then the Connor Stallion stuff happened. And Michigan really showed the world who they are by the way they reacted. They were so defensive. They embraced that guy as a hero. They deflected and made ridiculous accusations, not just their fans, but their media. They were condescending to the rest of us. We were all a bunch of idiots. I sat back and laughed because they were showing everybody what we've been dealing with them for all of our lives. Ryan Day hired a private eye. He's got a RICO case out on him. Ryan Day's brother was behind the investigation. They hold true to that to this day, guys. But they showed everybody who they are, and everybody realized, oh, we were mistaken. These aren't actually two similar groups of folks at Ohio State and Michigan. These are very different groups of people. Michigan is just a weird one, unto its own. And it's a very weird thing that happens sometimes. You see it when a movement starts and a group of people gets very insular and they rally around each other and they live in a little echo chamber and they think they're the smartest guy in the room and everybody else is an idiot. Nobody else has the facts. That's what these folks are like, man. They are something. They're a different breed. They've had 3 years of success capped with a national championship after getting pounded into submission since the early 2000s by Ohio State. And the odds are what's coming is going to look more like it looked for that 30-year-old's entire life than what it looked like for the last 3 years. I mean, that's just the odds. I'm not lying when I say that. It's just math. The coach that led them to that era is gone. What in the world would make them think that it's going to be any different? But they think that they've resurrected this program to the point where they can just plug anybody in and it's going to keep working. They're wishing it. They aren't hoping it. They're calling you an idiot if you don't see it. And they think it so much that despite Vegas saying otherwise, logical college football fans around the country saying otherwise, that you're an idiot if you say it just because you're an Ohio State fan. Well, I've said otherwise. The other day I did a video on Tony Alford. I called him Tony Alford because Tony has been tasked for the last 9 years at Ohio State with helping to instill this rivalry to the kids from around the country, as the team makeup now consists of less than half of Ohio kids. And it's just not, Ohio State, every program has done more and more recruiting nationally in the internet era. It's not just the Buckeyes, right? You used to try to get a footprint in a certain area to get yourself known, or you would want to bring in a conference member from another area around the country so that your program would be more visible in that area of the country. None of that's necessary anymore. The exposure of the internet has just made every program available to every kid around the country. It's shrunk the country. It's just shrunk everything. More than half of Georgia's class isn't from Georgia. This isn't just an Ohio thing. A lot of the SEC schools try to say that Ohio needs to go outside of Ohio to get their players, and they try to knock us for that. Georgia and Alabama's rosters consist of guys the same way, 50% outside the state that ours does. So we all agree that we need to go get the best players. There's no denying that there are certainly some drawbacks, and one of them is that these kids don't grow up in the rivalry when we go get these players from out of state. So we need guys like Tony Alford to instill that in them, and he did it. The other day I was talking about a little clip that I watched. It was a game from 2006, and it showed on the broadcast what we always used to see, which was they would pop up the hometowns of all the kids on the starting lineup. And I missed that. I loved that. I thought that was always so cool. And it would be even more interesting today, but they don't do it anymore. But it was something like 18 kids on the Ohio State offense and defense that were from Ohio. And that was just in 2006. So a pretty drastic change we're talking about. It's down to about a third, if we're lucky, of the class being from Ohio. So it's been a mission of the coaching staff to make sure that the rivalry lives on, and not just at Ohio State, but at Michigan as well. And the longest tenured coach in that locker room certainly preached a ton about the rivalry and what it means, and that it goes beyond football. And then he showed them that it didn't really mean anything to him, that he just fed them a line of crap. And for those that are defending Tony's actions, I just want to ask you, as these coaches are preaching to these kids that are still there, that just watch this happen with Tony, the kids that are from out of state, what do you think they're thinking? When they're trying to tell them how much it means and that it's real, they're laughing when the coach turns their back at this point, because they were just shown the example from one of their fellow coaches, a guy in their profession, who just showed them that it meant absolutely nothing. And that's Tony's fault. And we're getting laughed at, clowned at Michigan, all around the country, and that's Tony's fault. We're having a hard time getting the guy that we want, because leaving at this point, after the coaching carousel is done and everybody has a job, is screwing over the program that you're currently at. And they don't want to do that unless it's a substantial upgrade. And for it to be a substantial upgrade means we can't get our prime target. And that's Tony's fault. But somehow I got a lot of Ohio State fans mad at me just for calling him Tony Alford. We got a bunch of people in the Ohio State media and on the Ohio State shows going out of their way to take up for Tony Alford. And I want to be clear, this isn't really about Tony Alford to me. It could be anybody. And I understand if somebody had a personal relationship with Tony Alford, and that may trump your allegiance to anything else. But I feel like it's being unnecessarily flaunted and thrown out there by some folks. You know, you can just pass on it. You don't need to make your statement that you hope Tony Alford wins every game next year. You'll be rooting for him every game but one. You don't need to say that. You're choosing to come out and say that. So there were some that were mad at me for calling him Tony Alford, and I guess I see where they're coming from by that. But I hope they see where I'm coming from as well. And I hope they understand that we're on the same team, and we don't have to agree, but there's no reason to get mad at each other. And I'm not mad at any of the fellow fans that want to feel that way. I am irritated at a couple of the former players that have said some things. I'm irritated with a couple of talk show hosts that have said some things, because there's some things you just don't need to say. You can give him a call and let him know you support him. You don't need to come out and embarrass us further. I expected those comments from Michigan folks. I didn't expect so many from Ohio State folks, but that's okay. I respect everybody's opinion, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to get irritated by it. I can get irritated by it. And I fully admit that I take this a little too seriously, okay? I understand that. I mean, look at who you're talking to, right? I get it. I take it too seriously. I do. But what keeps surprising me about the Michigan folks is that so many of them think that this is just flipped on its head and that all of a sudden it's going to remain this way. They think it's all the way back and that this Tony Alford move is just more evidence that they are now in the driver's seat of this rivalry. I just removed 30 comments out of the comment section from my video I did on it, not because I didn't want to see the comments or didn't want other people to see the comments, but because when I log in, if I don't respond to a comment, it won't go away unless I respond to it. Well, I'm not going to say anything to these idiots, so I have to erase it, or I'm going to have to look at it every day when I first log in. I don't want to do that, so I had to erase them, remove them. But no, I didn't block them. No, come on in. They can say anything they want. I love it when they show themselves. And they think that this Tony Alford move is just one more piece of evidence that they're in the driver's seat. Well, I said I thought Tony Alford made a poor business decision and that he was going to go to Michigan and have 3 poor years at Michigan because I think Michigan is going to fall off. And that is apparently ridiculous of me to say, according to the Michigan folk. But Michigan made a fatal flaw when they hired Sherrone Moore. I thought at the time it was probably the move that I would have made. If I was a Michigan fan, I think I probably would have endorsed it. They had just won a national championship. They clearly had a good thing going. To keep the pieces together and to try to keep the band together and get one more out of it while you're on top, I thought was probably the right move. But I thought when I said that this probably meant that Jim Harbaugh was going to go to San Diego and not raid the entire staff. Now, I know that they got a bonehead AD. We've known that for a while. Did this guy not check with the guys, or did they just lie to him? The half the coaching staff that left. There's no way he could possibly be that much of a simpleton that he didn't check, because the difference between Sherrone Moore with Harbaugh's whole coaching staff from last year and Sherrone Moore essentially being a rookie head coach coming in and hiring a whole new staff is astronomically different. Now, no, that's a horrible move now. And that's essentially what they did. And that made all the difference. This is a vastly different scenario, which is going to have vastly different outcomes. Sherrone Moore is an offensive coordinator at Michigan, right? And had he hit the market this offseason, looking for a head coaching job, he would have been a candidate for an Oklahoma State or a Kansas State level job if he was lucky. That's the level of job, not a Michigan level job. Tom Herman was the hottest thing since sliced bread coming off a national championship at Ohio State. Remember, Tom Herman got the job at Texas, but not from there. He had to go to Houston first. And now we're talking about a big-time offensive mind in Tom Herman. A guy with a sexy offense. Sherrone Moore isn't that kind of offensive coordinator. He's a competent offensive coordinator, but they don't run some revolutionary offense. That offense is just about execution. It's a Stone Age offense. This guy might have gotten a Big 12 job, but I think it would have been more likely that he would have ended up in a MAC or a SWAC or a Sun Belt level job first for a couple of years. You don't get a blue blood job coming off of an offensive coordinator position unless you're a guy that has some serious chops and some serious cred running an offense that, that people are like, whoa, look at this offense. That's not what he did. You got to be a Ryan Day, sexy offense guy, quarterback guru, or a Steve Sarkisian who had coaching experience from Alabama. He had been a head coach. Then he was the offensive coordinator at Alabama. Then he gets a Texas job, a blue blood job. Lane Kiffin had been a head coach at 2 previous spots when he was the offensive coordinator at Alabama. Then he gets the Ole Miss job. Both had already been head coaches. Ryan Day takes over a program with everybody in place, and it was known that everybody would be staying in place. Ryan Day wouldn't have got that job on the free market if it was a total rebuild, and he had to come in and hire a brand new coaching staff. But he would have gotten a better job in the open market than Sherrone Moore would because he's innovative. He's an offensive mind. Sherrone Moore's not an offensive mind. He calls plays in a Stone Age offense. You don't get a Michigan level of job coming off an offensive coordinator season in a Stone Age offense with no head coaching experience. There's nothing that he was going to excite the college football world about on the free market, on the open market. There's just not. That's not how this works. To come in and hire a brand new staff, he's already made a major screw up because his new defensive line coach, Greg Scruggs, before his first ever practice at Michigan, just got himself a DUI on Saturday at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, you could say that's not Sherrone's fault. It's not directly. But Greg Scruggs had 2 DUIs on his record when Sherrone brought him in. So the buck stops with him as far as I'm concerned. He's the boss now. What did Sherrone have to say about the 3rd DUI from Greg Scruggs? Quote, Greg made an unfortunate mistake and he was arrested for operating a vehicle while intoxicated. He made no excuses and has taken accountability for his action. He's suspended indefinitely, and I'm sure that they're going to fire him. They probably will by the time you see this. There's no way he can survive this, I think. But I got no patience or sympathy for someone who's driving around this day and age drunk with the ease of ride sharing. It's the most selfish thing you could possibly do. We all know how many people it kills. It kills moms, it kills kids. It's vile. It's disgusting. And Greg Scruggs was probably pretty trashed because he was in Ann Arbor when this happened. And you'd imagine if he was pretty close, they'd have probably cut him loose. So I'm guessing he was pretty trashed. That's just speculation, but either way, it doesn't matter. Here's the problem. This is the problem I got with Sherrone Moore. And that statement, obviously they should have fired him immediately, but I'm not sure. There might be some legal stuff involved. And that news broke Saturday. So, okay, I can understand that a bit, I suppose. But Sherrone said Greg made an unfortunate mistake and that he made no excuses and is taking accountability for his actions. For starters, that's not an unfortunate mistake, Sherrone. That's a conscious decision that Greg made, and disgusting one at that. He made your whole program look bad. But he attempted to minimize what Scruggs did there by letting us know that Greg is taking accountability for his actions. Buddy, this isn't 7th grade, okay? He didn't trip his pal when he was walking down the lunch line. I don't give a shit if he took accountability for his actions, for his 3rd DUI. He can save that for the judge. Why are you saying that? We're talking about a guy that's been on the staff for 2 weeks. Tell him to pound salt. I mean, those aren't words from Sherrone Moore that come from a strong leader. That is disgusting behavior from a grown man on Scruggs' part. And Sherrone Moore just minimized it to run cover for him because that's the Michigan man way, right? You got this rookie head coach hiring his staff for the very first time at a blue blood program, replacing the entire offensive line, 1st-round quarterback, 18 guys at the combine, a Vegas win total of only 9.5 games, the 8th to 10th best odds to win the national championship, the 3rd best odds in the Big Ten. But somehow, I'm delusional to think that Tony Alford is going to go have 3 bad years up in Michigan. I'm delusional. They're absolutely going to regress. And in the Sherrone Moore era, I don't think it's going to last long because Michigan isn't a learn-on-the-job type job. And I am happy that the 30-year-old now has felt the worst side of this rivalry because now he gets to feel what it's like when you've been on the bottom and you get to come all the way back. The way that we got to feel it, thanks to Jim Tressel, because that's where that kid's headed, that 30-year-old. I'm calling him a kid. That's where he's headed. He's headed all the way back. And to the folks justifying Tony Alford's decision and act as though he was somehow disrespected for getting a 1-year deal for less than what he got the previous year, that's not disrespect. If he was doing his job in a way that was satisfying his boss, that wouldn't have happened. It's not disrespect at all. It's just letting us know on the outside how good of a job he was doing according to the man who employs him. And it's pretty clear that Ryan probably didn't want to move forward with him, which is why he did what he did. Some have found that cowardly. I disagree. We have absolutely no idea the conversation that took place between the two of them. It seemed like it was a show me year. Sometimes you try for a couple years to get an employee to do the right thing. They take their job for granted and they don't. They act like they're bigger than the operation. They don't make the changes you've asked them to make. We've all seen it in our careers. And for some reason, when it comes to football, everybody acts like it's something different. This is just a normal employee-employer relationship. We've all seen it 100 times. And it seems apparent to me, knowing what we know now, that Ryan had tried this for a couple years. It wasn't working, and this was his last straw. That's not disrespect. It's disrespect to your job and to your boss to put them in that situation to make them have to do that. An employer does not want to have to do that. He doesn't want to prod his employees to do their job. He doesn't want to put them in a show me year. He just wants them to do what's expected, what they had previously done. And what we've seen since this has happened and the reaction from a whole lot of Ohio State media and a whole lot of ex-players is nothing but people stumping for their friend. Certainly understandable. Some people would stump for their friend over any other loyalty at all. I get it. But I find it disrespectful to the Ohio State fan base that so many of them have gone out of their way to say things like they're going to be rooting for Tony every game except for the Ohio State game. The timing of this whole thing was incredibly poor. Even if you don't disagree with the decision, that's not up for debate. Because it certainly appears now Robert Gillespie from Alabama is no longer a candidate. We knew that here, that it was very unlikely, because when Kalen DeBoer came in, he made him feel like he needed him. He raised him. He promoted him. We talked about it the first night his name popped out. He's all in. He's bought in down there. And I said that the other day, what Tony did now is going to make Ohio State go steal somebody else's coach after spring ball has started, and then they're going to go steal somebody else's coach. What you're asking at this point is for someone, when you want to hire him now, is they got to go to their program and screw them off. I mean, Tony Alford started this chain reaction, so it's his selfish act is now going to trickle down. And the coaching community is tight, man. So you may make some better money right now, but if it's not a massive upgrade in jobs, then it can also put a pretty serious ding on your reputation. So it's got to be a major upgrade. And it's certainly not a major upgrade for Robert Gillespie to leave Alabama to come to Ohio State. That's a wash. We're hearing a lot about Stan Drayton, DeMarco Murray. Who knows at this point? DeMarco Murray's got an interview. That would be an awesome hire. He's now interviewed at Michigan, and now he's going to interview at Ohio State. So it's pretty safe to assume we can probably think that this guy wants out, right? I saw an Oklahoma guy say today that he thinks that him and Brent Venables aren't getting along. Brent Venables, I think, is going to be a short-lived coach at Oklahoma. I don't think he's cut out for it. And I pretty much think that he's kind of shown us he was never cut out to be a head coach in the first place by how long he stayed at Clemson when he was one of the most desired guys in the country for years. And he just kept staying and staying and staying. And that always seemed really odd to me. So they're heading to the SEC. I don't think they're going to be in good shape. And I think DeMarco sees the writing on the wall there. So it's a pretty decent shot that we could get him. And I think if he's up for it, that's probably the guy that we're going to end up with. Stan Drayton, hey, Stan Drayton's list of all-time recruits is pretty doggone good. Pretty doggone good. But there's no way around what Tony did being a garbage move. So people can stick up for him all he wants. You know what else I'm sick of hearing? 800,000 versus 2.4 million. What would you do? Listen, you're comparing 1 year of salary versus 3. That's not how that works. I get so irritated with people, man. But It was a garbage move, man. I have a hard time even understanding how anyone could even feel okay with what Tony did. I really do. But the point of the segment, and yes, I've rambled, is that yes, by any normal logic in recent history, it is 100% more likely that the Michigan program will fall backwards from where they've been the last 3 years than it is that that will keep going, which is how I started talking about this. And boy, you get me rolling, guys. I'm telling you, I'm sorry. I hope this episode wasn't too long. But so tomorrow we will be looking forward to a press conference for Ryan Day, and we'll see what he has to say. It should be interesting. We're definitely not going to get any videos from practice. We now know that, and that stinks. But hey, what are you going to do? Coach's call. I disagree with it, but we will do the best we can with what we get. So I will talk to you then. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you find podcasts. I upload those every day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Chuck and Bucks out.